poll finds Israelis want to reduce dependency on the US. The Prime Minister says Western sanctions on Iran are already unravelling. Activists stage a reverse flotilla inside of the Gaza Sea blockade. And our legal affairs correspondent gives an overview on the Tel Aviv bus bomber. Shalom and welcome to the Jerusalem Post News, our top stories for Tuesday, December 3rd. A new poll has found almost half of Israeli Jews believe Israel must reduce its dependency on the United States and find other allies on the global stage. The monthly Peace Index poll by the Israel Democracy Institute and Tel Aviv University published Monday comes amid tensions between Jerusalem and Washington over the new deal on Iran's nuclear program. Asked if Israel should seek new allies, 49% of Israeli Jews said yes, while 45% said no. However, 70% of those polled doubted Israel would find any other allies, though 71% said they still believe America is Israel's most important ally. The poll also found Israelis pessimistic about the success of the deal with Iran, with just 18% believing an agreement will see the end of Tehran's suspected development of nuclear weapons capability. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has warned that tough sanctions on Iran over its nuclear program are already unravelling following the interim agreement signed last week between Tehran and the world powers that aims to limit Iran's nuclear capabilities. Speaking in Rome on Monday after meeting with Italian Prime Minister Enrico Letta, Netanyahu said there appears to be general relaxation of sanctions and a rush to accommodate Iran. Netanyahu added if the sanctions regime against Iran does collapse, it would signal the end of chances to stop the country's nuclear program through peaceful means. Around 300 of Palestinian and international activists set out on a flotilla from Gaza on Monday, attempting to break Israel's 11-kilometre naval blockade of the Strip. The activists told the Jerusalem Post they were demonstrating to put pressure on Israel to stop its violation against the fishermen and against the illegal blockade and occupation. Though the flotilla in the end kept within permitted boundaries, the Israeli Navy had prepared for the possibility that it would challenge the blockade. Despite this, the flotilla was being viewed by the army as just a media provocation. Palestinian organisers said their boats turned back to Gaza after the presence of many IDF ships and aircraft made them fear for their safety. On Monday, 19-year-old Palestinian Mohammed Mafaja was convicted of planting a bomb on a Tel Aviv bus during the tail end of the Israel-Gaza conflict last November, which left over a dozen Israelis wounded. The prosecution dropped the harshest charge of a life sentence against him, but apparently they will be still trying to push for 25 years. I'm here now with Jerusalem Post's legal affairs correspondent, Yonah Bob. Yonah, thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
What exactly was the harshest charge that could have been brought against Mafaja, and what was said in his defense?
The harshest charge was aiding the enemy in a time of war. They still have lots of other good stuff against him, attempted murder, all sorts of other charges. But there were four things that they said that changed the equation. One was nobody was killed. That completely changes the entire equation, whether 26 people were injured versus one person dying. In Israel and in most Western countries, it changes the equation. Number two, he was young. He's only 18. Unlike Nidal Amar, who was allegedly killed Tomer Chazan, 18 years old, people could think maybe he was pressured, maybe he didn't fully understand the consequences of what's going on. No prior record. Aside from being 18, you could be 18 and you could have been involved with terrorists from the age of 14. He wasn't. Maybe the most important thing, no mandatory sentence. In other words, there are charges like murder where you have automatic life sentence, you spend your whole life in jail. Here, it wasn't like that. The judge had complete discretion. They could either decide to give him full life sentence in jail or less than that. And the prosecution said, look, do we want to go through the whole trial and maybe get the same thing that we could get from a plea bargain anyway?
So what have you seen of the public reaction of his conviction and also dropping of the harshest charge? What are we likely to see as well next year when he has his hearing?
I think we're going to definitely see protests after the sentencing hearing in February. But beyond that, we might also see some legislative change. Again, maybe the prosecution might have made a different decision if there was a mandatory sentence. If the judge had no discretion, had to sentence him to life sentence based on the charge, and the Knesset makes the laws. So people are going to ask the question, why are we saying that somebody can try to kill an entire bus, injure 26 people, and get to come back on the streets? This guy's going to be on the streets for sure in his early 40s, maybe even in his 30s, depending on how it pans out.
Okay, so with the rest of the cell that he was affiliated with near Ramallah in the West Bank, what's happened to the other members of that cell? We saw the IDF hunted down and killed one of the members in a cave shootout.
Right, so you have Asi, who was killed in a cave on October 22nd in Bilin. He was one of the planners. There's another group of them that are under indictment in the West Bank military courts. The mastermind, the leader of the whole thing, his name is Musa, and I can't say from who. On terrorism cases are a little bit sensitive, but I believe that after Mafarja is sentenced, we could see a plea bargain deal in the case of Musa as well.
Okay, and just, you mentioned Tomer Hassan's case, the IDF soldier who was lured into the West Bank by his restaurant co-worker. Nadal Amar, who's substantially older, is likely to get a life sentence. How, legally speaking, is his case different from Mafarja, who still went with intent on a bus to blow people up? I mean, how is this different? Right,
look, on one hand, what Mafarja did shocked the entire country. Everything froze. People said, oh my God, are we back in the age of suicide bombings? On the other hand, nobody died. He was only 18. And Amar is 42 years old. He has a family. He has no excuses. He strangled Tomer Hassan with his own hands and with a belt from his brother's pants. So it's clear that he brought him there premeditatedly. There's a much higher chance that he's going to get a life sentence.
Okay, and that's all we've got time for. Thank you, Yona, for being with us today. And thank you from everyone at the Jerusalem Post studio. We're back tomorrow with more main headlines. Until then, shalom.